A very warm welcome to all the distinguished speakers and a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone tuned in from around the world for this very first ever Global Climate Adaptation Summit 2021 hosted by the government of Netherlands. The summit will be held to recognize the critical need for leadership to accelerate adaptation at a pace commensurate with the fast developing climate challenges, and a call to build forward better following the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's event, one of the series of events that form part of the Adaptation Summit, is hosted by the World Resources Institute in partnership with the Global Commission on Adaptation's Action Track partners. This includes the Government of Canada, Mexico, UN Environment Program, UNEP, and the Global Environmental Facility, GEF. This session aims to bring much attention to nature's potential as an adaptation measure in response to climate change and to catalyze efforts to scale nature-based solutions by bringing governments, global institutions, civil societies, and academics together to support these efforts. I would like to welcome our first distinguished speaker, my old friend, Dr. Detjen Tsering, the Regional Director of the United Nations Environment Program for the Asia-Pacific regions, to share her views and thoughts on making nature-based solutions a global adaptation priority. Detjen?
Thank you, sir. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the world's climate is changing rapidly and threatening people's well-being, food security, and worsening poverty. Recent research suggests that nature-based solutions could provide around 30% of cost-effective mitigation that is needed by 2030 to stabilize warming to below 2 degrees centigrade. Healthy ecosystem enhance our resilience to future shocks by strengthening food security, protecting us from climate impacts, and improving our health. There are many tangible and sizable economic benefits to be derived from nature-based solutions, and interventions range from building artificial wetlands within cities to reduce flooding, managing watersheds to provide clean water, restoring mangroves to mitigate storm damage. Global urbanization is accelerating, and more than 2.3 billion people live in the Asia-Pacific region, and they live in cities. So the need for a sustainable urban future has never been greater. Nature-based solutions have been recognized in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and is attracting increasing attention within the context of the biodiversity-related conventions and in the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as a tool that offers a transformative approach needed to achieve the protection, restoration, sustainable use of biodiversity. The decade of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021-2020 will focus on, it's just started, and I'll focus on restoring damaged and degraded ecosystems in addition to conserving biodiversity, and nature-based solutions will play a very key role in this effort. Both the Global Environment Facility and the Green Climate Funds have started to support adaptation projects that enhance ecosystem resilience. However, nature-based solutions receive a very small share of the climate finance available, and there's been very little progress so far on greening COVID-19 stimulus packages, with limited investment made in supporting nature-based solutions. The submitted nationally determined contributions from this region highlight the determination of countries to strengthen efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to develop national adaptation plans. But we need more concrete evidence-based targets for nature-based solutions. Only around 17% of the nationally determined contributions include nature-based solutions, and they set quantifiable and robust targets. So as countries in this region revise or prepare new nationally determined contributions, COVID-19 response and recovery phases, there is an opportunity to increase global ambition on climate change through strengthening nature-based solutions, including supporting the nature-based solutions for the Climate Manifesto. This draws on existing nature-based and best practice for climate initiatives in the nature-based contributions platform. We must build economic systems that value nature as a central source of human well-being, environmental health, and economic prosperity in the post-COVID-19 world. In conclusion, as the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said, we need to turn the recovery into a real opportunity to do things right for the future, and nature-based solutions can form an important part of this opportunity to shift toward a sustainable and resilient future. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dechen, for your leadership and for sharing with us the work that UNEP is doing to advance nature-based adaptation. This is profoundly important, and as you said, it hasn't been given adequate attention, and we need to put it right up front and center. We've been looking at the framework within which we can think about these issues, and I'd like to welcome Jayapura, Director of Integrated Urban Planning in WRI India, to share some opportunities to accelerate the design and implementation of nature-based solutions for adaptation in cities that have been spurred in the Year of Action with support from the Global Commission. Jaya?
Thank you, Dr. Khosla. Glad to be here and share more on the work that we have developed together with partners in the last year. But let me begin by saying, we know that cities are at the front lines of climate change. We are witnessing the impacts in our cities here in India with increasing cyclones, day zero situations, recurrent flooding, and extreme heat. With global urban populations on the rise, WRI believes that spurring adaptation action at the city level is critical for a successful global adaptation strategy. Nature-based solutions work as both adaptation and mitigation interventions, presenting that win-win situation. We know that healthy ecosystems underpin economic and societal growth. And so, in the last year, we have taken several steps to help spread this action in our cities. City-to-city learning is key for scaling. Hence, NPS-focused city network like the Cities for Forest and others like the Jeff Skip program have offered an opportunity to build a strong learning community on NBS for adaptation. We have also set an ambitious goal to help scale NBS in 65 cities by 2030. Through the Commission's support in the Year of Action, we took 3 key steps to help scale work on NBS. I will now quickly share what we have done in the past year.
Thank you.
I will just be sharing my screen, Dr. Khosla.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Yes, we can see your screen. It's disappeared. How many slides is it? Yeah.
It's just 1 slide.
Good.
All right. Firstly, we developed and disseminated 3 knowledge products that will help cities build capacities to better plan and design inclusive NBS interventions for adaptation. We launched an online toolbox that features a curated set of tools to help cities map green assets, value green strategies, and engage communities, among other things. 2 other knowledge products developed include a social equity learning guide and an urban forests learning guide. Second, a critical gap in advancing NBS is the lack of technical capacity in developing viable business plans for NBS projects. Through the Year of Action, we've advanced innovative financing and governance strategies for NBS in cities. We supported Little Rock, Arkansas, develop and issue a green bond to address water stress, and are supporting San Francisco, California, establish a joint benefits authority to address its coastal erosion and flooding risks. With support from the Commission, we have advanced the concept of a project preparation facility to provide financial and technical assistance to cities, civil society, and infrastructure owners to design and implement NBS projects. We aim to build momentum with sponsors for a possible launch of this PPF at the COP26 in Glasgow later this year. And finally, we are profiling the Vanguard cities at the summit to inspire scaled commitments on NBS from other cities. The Year of Action has spurred collaboration between the cities and NBS action tracks to identify and recruit 12 cities at the vanguard of NBS. These cities have committed to scale NBS action such that it will yield benefits to a majority of the city's populations by 2030. 3 regional panels of Vanguard cities are being held at CAS 2021 summits, such as the one today, to call attention to the leadership shown by these cities to adapt NBS strategies and invite others to make NBS a global adaptation priority. Thank you, Dr. Khosla.
Thank you, Jaya. This is a terrific overview of the kind of issues that we are going to be dealing with over the next years. Now, it's probably time for us to hear from the city leaders from this region, Asia and Pacific region. And we have very distinguished mayors and city leaders that are here to help define what kinds of things they consider important. First, let's hear from Mrs. Vera Ravina Sari, who is the Acting Deputy Director for Spatial Planning and Environment of DKI, Jakarta's provincial government in Jakarta, Indonesia. And welcome, Vera. We would like to have.
Thank you, Dr. Khosla. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, let me introduce you to the city. Jakarta is the biggest metropolitan city in Indonesia. The city is facing challenges due to climate change, such as floods, sea level rise, temperature rise, and environmental degradation. Given the challenges, the government has committed to change the situation by reducing the greenhouse gas emissions while improving the quality of life of the city inhabitants. Nature is a precious jewel for Jakarta. In this regard, the city has done numerous actions to conserve its nature. Integration of green and blue infrastructures is implemented in urban parks and green open spaces development. In total, Jakarta has constructed 55 new green open spaces until 2020. Those actions are not just beneficial to improve the air quality and beautify the city, but also to expand the water catchment area. Another nature-based solution approach is implemented in flood management action through river and watershed naturalization. This action is aimed to maintain water resources, develop waterfront green open space by considering the flood control and environmental conservation function. Furthermore, an urban farming movement has been promoted to increase the city food security. Jakarta has a target of having reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable and nutritious foods. In order to do that, an urban farming grand design is created to unite efforts to develop urban farming in the capital city with communities. Situated on a delta, strategies are urgently needed to protect the coastal part of Jakarta. One of our strategies is planting mangroves for coastal protection. As we know together, mangrove is beneficial to protect shorelines from damaging storm, hurricane winds, waves, and tidal floods. Jakarta has planted around 28,000 mangrove trees in the coastal area of Jakarta last year, and will plant 40,000 mangrove trees by 2022. The city also has an important instrument to control the development. Big developments need to submit an environmental impact assessment document to receive a construction permit. Jakarta is currently adapting to environmental changes. The COVID-19 pandemic that is experienced globally has been a catalyst for us to accelerate the ongoing actions. We do these actions in order to adapt and mitigate climate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Indonesia has been a leader in environmental action. I remember in the early 70s at the Stockholm conference, we had Dr. Samavoto from Bandung, we've had Emil Salim. You had wonderful leaders, and I'm sure that you will be getting a lot of support from your national as well as provincial governments. Thank you from Deputy Governor Ravina Sari. I now like to invite Honorable Gary Jufa, who is a Member of Parliament and Governor of the Oro Province, Papua New Guinea, to share more of the work in Port Moresby and its surrounding areas in Papua New Guinea. Gary?
Yes, hi, doctor and team and everyone else.
We can hear you.
Governor Jufa, you may be on mute.
There's a problem with your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Papua New Guinea is the third largest tropical rainforest remaining on the planet. The country represents respectively 10% of the biodiversity and 7% of the lungs of the world. It is a global treasure that should be globally protected. But violent, illegal, and unchecked logging is decimating the tropical rainforests of Papua New Guinea. And while the indigenous people of our country pay the price today, it is the entire planet that will pay the price when it is gone or replaced with palm plantations or agricultural fields. In my province of Oro, we have approximately 300,000 hectares we have 5 portions of 300,000 hectares each, which could be conserved as working indigenous managed forests, which will benefit the first peoples of this land and the biodiversity that is unique to the planet, as well as generate economic return for generations to come. But we cannot do this alone. The Honorable Powers Pakop, who is the governor of our National Capital District, and myself are collaborating to save the future of our forests, coral reefs, and mangroves. Together with other parliamentarians, we will be hosting the first ever Papua New Guinea Summit on climate action. We need to establish the funding structures, educate our people globally, and act not only against the illegal destruction of our forests, but also to stand together to provide alternatives. And we need to protect the remaining tracts of land and ocean. We need partners from the countries and cities that are benefiting from our forests to ensure that they remain standing for generations to come. I call upon world and institutional leaders to stand beside us to preserve and protect what we cannot preserve and protect on our own. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Honorable Gary Jufa, Member of Parliament and Governor of Oro Province. Your leadership in Oro Province has been astounding, and I really want to appreciate the types of things that you've been doing, particularly to bring indigenous knowledge on nature-based solutions to the forefront. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Satya Gopal, who's Chairman and Managing Director of the Tamil Nadu Water Resources Conservation and Rivers Restoration Corporation in southern India, to share his experience in implementing nature-based initiatives.
Thank you, Dr. Ashok Khosla. Dr. Ashok Khosla, esteemed panelists and participants, good day to all of you. As we are all aware, extreme weather events caused by climate change are sparing neither the developed nor the developing countries. The problems are accentuated in the urban areas primarily because of the damages to the blue infrastructure. In Tamil Nadu, Chennai, the capital city, and its neighboring districts were severely impacted during 2015 December floods, which happened due to the once-in-100-year extreme weather event. And this was closely on the heels of floods in the third week of November 2015. Misuse of natural ecosystems has also aggravated the problem. The floods were followed by unprecedented failure of monsoon during 2016, the very next year, leading to the worst ever drought witnessed by the state of Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu government have revisited the strategy and adopted Tamil Nadu State Disaster Management Perspective Plan 2018-2030 to address multiple hazards, taking into account the priorities and goals set forth in Sendai framework. The plan envisages a systems approach with emphasis on restoration of river basins and the interface ecosystems, marshlands, creeks, etc. Specific timelines have also been fixed to address urban floods, drought, seawater erosion, and other disasters. Besides strengthening preparedness, which was given the highest priority, we are now focusing on permanent measures for restoration of the blue-green infrastructure. The macro drains of the rivers in the upstream areas, the micro drains in the city which were clogged were mostly restored. In areas where unregulated or poorly planned residential areas have cropped up in erstwhile irrigated agriculture lands, cut and cover drains were constructed by opening the roads to provide defined paths to the rivers and prevent inundation of the residential areas. Construction of stormwater drains in missing areas in urban areas, removal of encroachments in the waterways and water bodies, construction of reservoirs and replacing concrete surplus weirs with shutters for regulating flood waters based on forecast of rains, creation of diversion canals and link canals for intra-basin and inter-basin transfer of water, and then rainwater harvesting both at the domestic and institutional levels, where other strategies which have given results, positive results during the last 2 years. During severe cyclones, as most of us are aware, the green infrastructure, especially trees, are uprooted, adversely impacting both environmental interests and economic interests. While launching tree plantation programs, care is being taken in Tamil Nadu to plant sturdy native species in the place of uprooted trees, which are by and large exotic species. At the personal level, a new technique has been developed by me, which is called as CRA technique, or water conserving root zone irrigation technique, to grow trees and climbers faster with less water. Results have shown significant difference in height, biomass, and even at the individual leaf, the surface area is more in the saplings grown adopting the technique developed by me when compared with the conventionally grown tree saplings. The technique can also be blended with drip irrigation for better results as well as savings of water. The technique, which is very low cost, which relies on locally available materials, that is river sand, helps in additional carbon sequestration because of the increased biomass, larger surface area, and faster growth, as well as it reduces the carbon footprint due to reduction in water pumping hours. The low-cost technique is placed in public domain to help both organization as well as farmers to grow trees and climbers much faster with less water. The link will be provided to the officers of WRI, and those interested persons may mail their queries to me to the email provided to WRI. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Satyagopal. This is an incredibly innovative work on climate resilient planting and really extraordinary dedicated and committed work to finding new solutions to the problem of creating biomass. And I hope you're planting a lot of fruit trees because everybody says, you know what, you can't plant fruit trees because people will steal the fruit. But that's the whole point. They should steal the fruit and be better nourished. So I hope you are being...
We did plant fruit trees. In fact, we've also experimented on creepers and climbers on which vegetables and fruits are grown. And we have got excellent results for that.
Great. Thank you very much. Now I would like to introduce the Mayor of Jayapura in Indonesia, Honorable Mr. Benhur Tomi Mano. He couldn't join us in person, but we sent a pre-recorded remark. So may I ask the organizers to present his video? Sound? Can we get some sound?
International Climate Adaptation.
Terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity as the mayor of Jayapura, representing Jayapura city, to participate in the International Climate Adaptation Summit. Jayapura is one of the cities located in eastern Indonesia and directly bordered by Papua New Guinea. Apart from being the province capital, Jayapura is an exotic city, having its location in between the Cyclops, Abepura, and Jar Mountain Protected Forest Area. Jayapura also shares its location with the Utefa Bay, and its coastlines are facing the Pacific Ocean. According to Global Forest Watch, in 2001, Jayapura had an area of 549 square kilometers of primary forest, which is more than 72% of Jayapura land area.
Sound. Is there some sound?
The Jayapura city government has included green open spaces, including urban forests of at least 30% of the cultivated area in this regional spatial plan. Jayapura city is committed to implementing nature-based solution because of the city's natural potential as part of its climate change adaptation. We learn from other big cities that are members of cities of forests in dealing with urban problems, and we complement each other. We also understand the need to increase indigenous people's socio-economy as part of sustainable development. That's why we employ up to 843 indigenous people in the city government to manage and conserve our urban forests and open green spaces. The funding for our nature-based solution environmental management comes from our regional budget, which we can proudly say is quite high and have a significant increase throughout the years. We also collaborate with several institutions in the environmental sector to further improve our management. We thank you for this opportunity, and God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Mayor Ben-Hur Tomi Mano, for your leadership in Jayapura and for all the wonderful work that you're doing, and for creating space in your budgets for these kinds of actions. I would like to take the 1 minute that I have, since we're running so well on time, and I want to thank all the speakers for their incredible discipline in sticking to the issues and the timing of their statements. I'd just like to add a couple of ideas stemming really from all the things that the various mayors and governors have said, as well as Dr. Tsering's address at the beginning. Nature-based solutions are going to be the fundamental solutions of the future for both climate change on the one hand and biodiversity conservation on the other. The building you see behind me is the headquarters of my own NGO, an organization in Delhi called Development Alternatives, and it is a statement of an approach which is also nature-based. This building has been built almost entirely out of recycled materials, out of natural materials of various types, and uses virtually no major source of energy, water, or material that is not purely nature-based. It has essentially exemplified what we call biomimicry. Biomimicry is, in fact, not simply nature-based, but nature-inspired. Inspired by nature, how things, for example, termites keep their termite hills at a constant temperature, how beetles pull water out of the air, and a variety of other things. And we can learn from nature how to do things. And I believe that the future of nature-based solutions will be not only using nature, but also being inspired by and creating innovations based on natural systems. Now it is my great pleasure to invite the Minister for Economy and Climate Change of Fiji, the Honorable Ayaz Syed Qayyum, to give his remarks as a commissioner and as a key leader in Fiji, which is itself led from the front in the Asia-Pacific region on these kinds of issues. Honorable Qayyum.
Bula good afternoon. Good afternoon from here. I'm sure there's different parts of the world at different times, and greetings to all of you. I do not need to remind anyone here that 5 years post the Paris Agreement, the climate emergency is of course accelerating, and its painful impacts are impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, many of the nations which must adapt most urgently have been dealt a historic financial blow due to the global pandemic, in particular countries like ours that are hospitality-based. As some of you may know, Cyclone Yasa hit Fiji as a devastating Category 4 cyclone just before the Christmas holidays last month. While damage assessments are being finalized, we know very well the need to build back stronger and invest heavily in adaptation solutions. No easy task in the midst of a pandemic and when your revenues are actually hemorrhaging. Superstorms like Yasa are now more frequent and stronger than ever before in the South Pacific. They destroy homes and infrastructure, leave thousands of people stranded in evacuation centers and makeshift shelters for weeks and even months, and ruin crops and livelihoods of thousands of farmers. Accompanying storm surges submerge inland communities and island communities, flood rivers, triggering landslides and damaging key infrastructure such as transmission lines, highways, and cell towers. Since 2016, Fiji has experienced 12 strong cyclones, and more, of course, will come. We've got one being predicted to hit us in about 3 days' time. We have no choice, of course, but to adapt. We must live in homes and houses that remain standing despite 345 km/h wind gusts. Our riverbanks and waterways must be able to contain excess rain or be supported by infrastructure or nature-based solutions that allow us to manage the force of a storm surge or flood and protect communities nearby. And we must have infrastructure that remains functional during a crisis, meaning power lines need to be run underground and roads and bridges that can withstand the extra stress of swollen rivers and raging seas. To give a more practical example, in July last year, Fiji completed a nature-based seawall in Viro village on the island of Ovalau, and this wall cost about half the price of a conventional seawall and used mangrove, vetiver grass, and locally sourced boulders to shelter the village. Cyclone Yasa brought no notable damages to the hybrid wall, which did its job by holding back the storm surges. As Minister responsible for climate change, one of the most important responsibilities is to help catalyze innovative and cost-effective solutions that our communities can deploy and find resources to scale these solutions. That's exactly what we've done with vetiver grass, which deploys roots of up to 3 meters in depth, and during a flood or storm surge, acts as both an anchor for the soil and a wall for the water. We recently planted the grass in a village called Navai Dovatu, which formed part of the launch of the Global Commission on Adaptation flagship report, where it has halted serious erosion of the nearby riverbank for the past 2 years. The Fijian Ministry of Waterways and Environment has now opened 3 vetiver grass nurseries to help climate-proof 130 communities, including vulnerable rural areas and indeed urban centers also. Right now, the path to successful adaptation may look rocky and steep, but I think our discussion during this session will show that it can be navigated if we do 2 things. First, we need to figure out how best to implement and scale nature-based solutions. Second, we must translate climate science and innovative practical solutions by finding and mobilizing blended financing solutions. I hope these introductory remarks have provided food for thought for our panel discussion. And thank you for this opportunity. Vinaka, thank you.
Thank you, Minister Ayaz Qayyum, for very insightful comments. And you have indeed provided a great deal of food for thought. And we've been running so well on time that we have a good panel session. And I'd like to invite all the panelists, including Dr. Dechen Tsering and the Honorable Minister, to join us in asking trying to find a few things forward. And one of the thoughts that has occurred to me through all these wonderful interventions is we've been talking primarily about the issues of environmental and resource management, and the equity side of the dimension of sustainability hasn't been referred to adequately. I do know that all of you are concerned as deeply about fairness and social justice in our societies, in eradicating poverty, in making our communities more resilient and able to function better for and more prosperously for the poorest of the poor. So I would like to open the dialogue by asking Mayor of the Deputy Governor of Jakarta that could you tell us a little bit more about how Jakarta addresses social equity concerns when implementing nature-based solutions? How do you use nature to provide improved services for the most disadvantaged people in your area? I think it's just as important to get the big whammy, the big multi-purpose outcomes and results from nature-based solutions, because both equity and environment are important. So would you like to share a few ideas, thoughts about that with us? Mrs. Vera Rivina Sari.
Thank you, Dr. Khosla. The nature-based solutions in Jakarta are planned through public participatory process and are provided for all Jakarta inhabitants without any differentiation. So everyone can enjoy the result. All nature-based solution projects in Jakarta are open for public and for public goods. So, for example, the development of green spaces. These green open spaces are open for everyone. Some of the spaces are located in the middle of the high density residential areas. So, from the beginning, from the planning process, the inhabitants are involved to give their ideas about the green open space design, for example. So we involve many people from the beginning of the planning process. And then, furthermore, Jakarta puts forward nature-based solutions for climate adaptation while improving our citizens' quality of life, thus becoming a sustainable and livable city. For instance, we provide open space such as our urban parks that give anyone free access without discrimination. And in the coastal area of North Jakarta, where most of the vulnerable citizens live, we plan to develop public beach that is accessible for all citizens. Another example is when planting mangroves, we require the mangrove seeds originated from local farmers and encourage tourists to enjoy local community products. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me ask all the panelists, anybody who wishes to take it, you either show me your hand or you put up your hand on the chat side. What's worrying me is how do we scale this up? What do cities need to scale up their efforts on nature-based solutions in the way of technical assistance, in the way of finance, in the way of policy support, legislation? I think we need to get a little bit more into depth on what are the barriers and how do we overcome them? Would anybody like to address that? Would Gary Jufa like to suggest a few ideas about how we could scale all these up?
Sorry, Ashok, could you Could you just repeat that again? My apologies.
Not at all. I would be happy to do so. I was just basically saying that the next big thing that we need to worry about is how do we scale up these efforts to expand our nature-based solutions work? Do we need technical assistance or finance or policy support or various kinds of legislation? Would you have some ideas on how we go forward to expand our efforts?
Well, I can only talk on the context of Papua New Guinea and allude to possible suggestions. But in Papua New Guinea, we have 90% of our land here is owned by traditional landowners, by tribes and clans. And they're under enormous pressure to forfeit their forests for payments, provided or offered by logging companies, And without any alternative, they see that this is the only means by which they can, they can generate revenue income for themselves and progress. What we need to do is offer alternatives. And when I say we, I mean we as the world, The people here are custodians of some of the richest biodiversity in the world, home to the largest butterfly in the world and the black bird of paradise, many other endemic species of creature that we are in danger of losing if we don't take action. But the people have increased threats and pressure that force them to go into illegal logging or partner with those who are involved in that. And one way to offset that or stop that would be to provide alternatives. What are alternative solutions? Like, can we help them transport some of their cash crops to markets where they would be accepted? Can we assist them in finding means and ways by which they can use the forest to generate revenue? What could be done? These are the questions that we have to ask ourselves, from my perspective, anyhow.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Dr. Satyagopal, your story is one of such great innovation and creativity, but it's come from you and your colleagues. The question I have is, what are you doing to promote and support local small enterprises, startups, businesses that can do these things on their own and make money out of them? I mean, basically, long-term sustainability as well as scaling up depends on using the market to do good environmental work. So have you given some thought to how to support small enterprises, startups, and get big companies to partner with them to be able basically to do the kinds of things you're doing? You are muted. Dr. Satyagopal, you're still on mute.
Yeah. Are you referring to the technique that I have developed?
Yes, and for other techniques to encourage innovation.
Yeah, this actually, as far as general innovation is concerned, Government of India, as well as the state governments across the country, they have been encouraging the youngsters or even old timers who are coming out with innovative ideas. Now, coming back to the specific technique that I have developed, the government of Tamil Nadu is fully supporting me, and they have included this, the agriculture department, the forest department and the horticulture department. They have incorporated this as one of the techniques to popularize among the farmers. And from my side, I have kept this in the public domain, and I try to popularize this technique through social media so that anyone who's interested, he will be able to adopt in his own field, or even if he is trying to spread it through his own enterprise among the other farmers also. I left it freely open for everyone to do it, because at the bottom of my heart, I wanted as many trees as fast as possible to come up in India as well as in other places.
Thank you. Minister Qayyum, I was wondering when you were talking a little bit about what role you see for the private sector and the financial institutions, both domestic as well as international, to play in helping scale up investments in nature-based solutions.
Thank you. I think, we should start off from the premise that the climate finance needs actually far outweigh the climate finance flows, in particular in the space of adaptation. We struggle with that in particular countries, in the Pacific and many of the other island states, where we are at the coalface of climate change, but our carbon footprint is almost negligible. So notwithstanding that we've given undertaking to have, for example, net zero emissions by 2050, etc. So as you've seen, mitigation is probably where there is more private sector interest as opposed to in the adaptation space. Building a seawall is not necessarily very attractive to the private sector. Nonetheless, I think the opportunity there exists, in particular with the multilateral agency. We've got a forest carbon partnership facility. We've just signed up with the World Bank. In fact, we're signing on the dotted line tomorrow, where it refers to the discussion earlier on by the gentleman from Papua New Guinea, where you have in particular, in a country like Fiji also has about 91% more of the land is tribal owned land, or what we call matangalis or land owning units. It's held communally. And there is of course pressure to actually harvest the forest. But this particular facility will demonstrate to them that they will still get paid money if they keep the trees in the ground. And I think that's the type of thinking that we need to put out in the space. We've got a climate change bill that's going to be put before Parliament very soon, which sets a platform for carbon trading. And I think carbon trading is critically important to get private sector participation, which will actually help us invest in particular. Somebody talked earlier on about investment in mangroves. Of course, you've got a higher sequestration rate. Apart from that, the fact is it does protect our coastlines. It does provide a source of livelihood also. So that's how you can get through. We are talking currently about a blue bond issue that will again go towards some ocean-based solutions, which is where you can get private sector participation. And we've had a couple of approaches where there is a blended finance approach in respect of various adaptation programs. Most certainly, of course, we've got blended finance approach in the area of mitigation. The other point that I wanted to make was that I think it's critically important to harness the knowledge base that exists. For example, in your organization, the various speakers, to be able to come to a platform where there may be certain nature-based solutions that we may not be aware of, but it can work. It is currently working in other countries, but we may not be aware of that. So we need to be able to tap into that knowledge. And I think that sharing of information is critically important across the, in the nature-based spectrum that currently exists.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Yes. Dechen, you were really gave us a very wonderful overview of what UNEP and the international agencies are doing to promote nature-based solutions. Cities are at the other end of the spectrum. They're far away from the global kinds of institutions that you've been dealing with. Tell me how we're going to set up the interface. How are we going to get organizations like UNEP and GEF and GCF and so on to be able to deal directly with problems of cities and citizens in communities? Can you tell us a little bit more about what your thinking is on that?
Thank you very much, Ashok. When we start really to look at nationally determined contributions and what a country commits to, a lot of it will come from cities. So we need to make cities a very active part of nationally determined contributions, which is the mitigation ambition of a country, and the national adaptation plans, which is the adaptation communication of a country. So we're looking at things that come from sectoral ministries, but cities are going to be key. And I heard the excellent examples by the honorable mayors. And what I recognize is when we had the Climate Action Summit in 2019 and the UN Secretary General's Climate Action Summit, and the governments of China and New Zealand were key leads, and they put together this compendium on nature-based solutions. So there is a lot of information, but I think this information is not easily accessed. And the area that we found really hard when we were looking at not the fact that there wasn't funding for nature-based solutions, the fact that a lot of the financing, a lot of the methodological work was quite difficult. It was much easier to put together a proposal for a mitigation intervention. And so I think if cities will work with and invite, and for multilateral agencies, we'd be very happy to come in and do some of the technical, analytical work. We start to look at things like Honorable Minister talked about carbon sinks. Carbon trading is an area in the upcoming Conference of Parties, the 26th Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, where countries will have to come to an agreement. So really call on cities, mayors, honorable governors to become active in this field and to start to work with central level government, because at the end, this is where we can take real action. A lot of the work of green infrastructure, extremely passionate, a lot of good champions, but we're not able to see that being scaled up. Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you, Dechen. Yes, I'll come back to you in a minute because there's a follow-up question I have. My own experiences have been as a teacher in universities and in government. I set up the Ministry of Environment in the government of India in 1971, in UNEP, where I worked for a long time. And now for the last 40 years, I've been working as an NGO. And so obviously I'm concerned about how civil society fits into our plans, because a large part of the thinking on nature-based solutions, a large part of the action on nature-based solutions actually does come from civil society. It's organizations like IUCN and WWF and varieties of organizations at the national and international levels that have really promoted the idea of ecosystem services, of biodiversity conservation, and to put these to use for climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. So I would like to hear from the panelists a little bit about how civil society fits into this, because in my opinion, it's probably the fundamental and in a sense, the most important actor for promoting and for delivering these services to both cities and to nations. But maybe I am, biased because that's where I've been working for the last 40 years. I'd like to hear from you whether you see civil society partners as being important in your work. And if you can show your hand like that, I will be happy to call on you. And Dechen, the same applies at the international level, because obviously UNEP relies a great deal on substantive issues for promoting these with his partners in civil society. Gary, do you have a very strong civil society in Papua New Guinea that supports the work that you do?
Yes, we do. We do, Ashok. And I feel that they are a very important aspect of development in any nation. And in Papua New Guinea, especially, civil society groups play a very strong or important role in highlighting. They act as advocates for development, if I may. Every time there's a developer with a brilliant idea in regard to how to exploit a particular resource, civil society often scrutinizes, analyzes what they're planning to do, and then says to the government, look, this is the negative impact that it will have on the environment and on our people. And they play that very important role of providing a check and balance. In countries like Papua New Guinea, there is enormous pressure for us to develop, to basically take us from where we are to where the rest of the world is as we see it. We forget that we're just 45 years old, and we compare ourselves to nations that are already significantly developed and say, why aren't we like that? Why aren't we moving in that direction? And so there's this enormous pressure on politicians to find means and ways to develop their nation. And oftentimes in their enthusiasm, they overlook the importance of the environment, So for instance, we've got characters here in Parliament who want to promote coal, characters who want to promote seabed mining, and various other activities which civil societies come and say, look, these this may sound like a good idea, but these are the negative effects that it will have on our people and our environment. Oftentimes, they've taken a very extremist role in Papua New Guinea in that they're complete conservationists. But recently, we've seen some civil society groups emerge where they're saying, you know, yes, we can maintain our forest, but we will need to give up a little bit of land for farming, for other agricultural, for other activities, so that we can also ensure that the people have a means of earning revenue that is sustainable. So I'm seeing the emergence of those civil society groups, and I feel very comfortable that, you know, we're moving in the right direction in this regards. Because if we have just the extremist views who wish to preserve every twig, every creature, every, you know, millimeter square of land, then, you know, we won't be able to progress really. Progress is important, but it should be sustainable. You know, it should be in such a way that we look at what impact it will have 10, 20, 100 years from now on the environment.
You know, I wish there were many more governors with your broad vision and your acceptance of the fact that this is a dialogue in which you have to reconcile very conflicting issues. And the leaders of our countries and our provinces need to have the kind of understanding that you have obviously demonstrated. Minister Ayaz, I wanted to ask you, because you've done such incredible work on vetiver, on water, drinking water, and so on. Are you prepared from Fiji to share these with others? I mean, for example, we would love to, my own organization would love to know much more about how you've used vetiver for binding and stabilizing soils and slopes and so on. It would be very helpful for us to get your help.
Sure. I mean, you know, we're most willing to sort of share all that information, and we've had the Ministry of Environment and Waterways. Actually, interestingly enough, we created the Ministry of Waterways only a few years ago, given the fact that we had such a huge, inundation of water through, climatic events. A lot of rain. And so initially, I think some people had a bit of a joke about it. They said, oh, it should be called Ministry of Drains. But suddenly, everybody now wants to have a piece of Ministry of Waterways, either in the village or in the urban centers. So I think we're quite happy to share that information with you. We have a number of projects that we have earmarked. We identify, for example, go through a particular process of identifying the high-risk areas. We have 43 villages currently that has been earmarked that actually have to be moved to higher ground, because a lot of the villages are actually on coastal areas. We've already moved about 3 villages to higher ground. Now, it's not just physically sort of moving these people and the ancestral grounds that have been living there for the past number of 100 years, the grave sites are there, etc., etc. But the source of livelihood is from the sea. And you suddenly pick them up and plonk them on top of a hill, is a whole sort of livelihood situation, getting them to new skill sets. Yeah. But, we've actually got a couple of bit of literature on this too, which we've developed. And we're quite happy to share, through this platform.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. Coming back to Papua New Guinea for a second, I just want to tell Gary that one of the formative Bibles of the work that we do, which is on frugal technology and innovation, was a Papua New Guinean book called Lick Lick Book, which I don't know if you ever saw, but was a fabulous insight into how people, technology, and nature have to live together. And I just want to tell you that it was very important in my life to have those insights, and all of them came from Papua New Guinea. And it was very instructive. I don't know if you ever saw the book called the Lick Lick.
No, Ashok. I haven't seen it, but I'm going to take note now so I can find it.
You should find it. It's 30 years old, 40 years old. It's a wonderful book, compendium of nature-based solutions, basically. And these were, 40 years ago.
Lick Lick Book, did you say?
Lick Lick, L-I-K. Lick Lick Book.
Okay.
Very, very fine insights. Please do find it. It must be available in the library somewhere. Very good. Well,
I
listen.
shall do that. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a wonderful conversation. We're coming to the close of our 1 hour. If the organizers can tell me whether we have any more time, I will continue the conversation. Otherwise, we will now start wrapping it up.
We have about 1 minute.
1 minute. So is there 1 minute? Is there anything any of you would like to contribute? Dechen, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Ashok. Just to say that the Global Major Group and Stakeholder Forum will take place in February 2021, and civil society is so key for all these solutions, the knowledge, the mobilization, the advocacy. So this is before the UN Environment Assembly. But thank you, Ashok.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Vera, would you like to say any words to wrap up?
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. Jakarta needs to move forward together to achieve the vision of being climate resilient cities and take the pandemic momentum to work faster and smarter. So we invite you, all of you, to be a part of the solution and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Satyap Gopal, would you like to say a word? You're on mute, sir.
We might be cut off very soon.
Yeah, I would like to agree with the panelists that there is a great role for civil society, especially in nature-based solutions, because of the continuity, the advocacy, the involvement with the community. All these are advantages which civil society brings in. Probably the governmental system can focus more on grey infrastructure and involve the NGOs more into it. And coming back to the technique developed by me for growing trees faster, I will be sharing my email ID with Mrs. Smita, and anyone who is interested, they can mail me and I will be able to help them out if they're interested.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, in final wrapping up, I would just like to say that we've had a wonderful conversation. It's shown that governments are critically important in providing the basis and infrastructure, that private sector will have to be playing its role, that civil society will be having to play its role. My own favorite organizational framework is actually what is called a social enterprise, which is a combination of civil society and private sector. And I hope that we will be able to now, in all places, in Indonesia, in Fiji, in Papua New Guinea, in India, nurture the partnerships that we can have, the kinds of things that Dechen was talking about, partnerships between international agencies and local communities, but also partnerships among the different sectors. So I want to thank you all. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I've learned a great deal. Thanks a lot.